confirmed that the worst parts, the best parts, this is the best of the rest.
Hello, and I prey on the wicked and I suck out their souls. This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at superhero movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time. And this week, we are talking Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the demon that sucks the story right off the comic book page, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
Yeah, I am very ready for Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. That was a good one.
It's getting hard to come up with these. They're getting a little wacky, but the point is you're a comic book expert. You know a lot about comic books and characters and stories and their history. So whenever we need to kind of explore how a movie relates to the source material, I know I can always count on you, Andrew. Now, tell me a little bit about your history with this movie, the sequel to the 2007 movie Ghost Rider. Did you see it in theaters? Have you seen it before this week?
I don't think so, outside maybe bits and pieces of it. Like, I feel like there's scenes of this movie that got kind of memed. Maybe not memes, not the right word, but there's definitely scenes in this movie that
get referenced a lot, usually not in the best light.
Usually not in a good light. But I can't say that I saw this in theaters, but I can only assume that, like, with the MCU firing on all cylinders at the time, when I saw another Nick Cage Ghost Rider was coming out, and then I saw the word of mouth, I probably was like, all right, we can skip this one.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So the first one came out in 2007, pre-MCU, pre-Iron Man. This one comes out 5 years later, 2012, same year as the Avengers.
Yep.
Like, wow, a lot changed in that short period of time, right? Crazy.
Absolutely. I can only assume that was why they made another shot at it, was because superhero movies were certainly in vogue by that time. But yeah, this one didn't really catch on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, superheroes, they really popped off in 2000. X-Men, Superman after that. We've talked about this a lot, but the MCU obviously brings it to like a whole nother level. Throughout like the 2000s, 2000s to 2010, everybody's talking about the superhero bubble. Yeah, there's a lot of comic book movies, but they're not all making a lot of money. They're not all getting high critical scores. How long can this last? And then late in that decade, the MCU kicks off and solidifies in 2012 with the Avengers, and the superhero movies are never going away. It is now like a new genre of film. So you're right. That's probably a reason they are like, what can we make a sequel to? What's out there that we can keep adapting? And they scrape this one together. It releases wide release February 17th, 2012. Again, February
nice
release.
Nice Valentine's Day movie.
Yeah. On a budget of $75 million. At the box office, it just brings in 133 million, likely clearing all costs because it wasn't not a huge budget, not a ton of marketing for this movie. But critically, I mean, straight up panned, just an 18% on Rotten Tomatoes critic score. Audiences are not much nicer, just a 31% audience score. It's always a little bit higher than critics, but that's to be expected, but it's not way higher. I mean,
no,
31% is still not a glowing review by any means.
Not driving people over to the theater. Not at all.
It does look like they're trying to sort of follow the success of the first movie, which also released in February 16th. Again, right around that Valentine's Day time. The first one had Eva Mendes, and it did have a romantic subplot that has entirely dropped from this movie. So there's really not an excuse to drop in February. The first movie had a budget of 110 million and brought in $228 million. So it had a slightly higher budget that first go round. Still didn't make a ton of money, but was definitely profitable. The critic score that first movie was 26%. So it's all scaled down a little bit. The budget wasn't quite as high. They were kind of tempering the expectations. Still made enough money. Very similar numbers to that first movie.
Right. Yeah. They clearly are like, okay, we want to go again, but let's lower the risk. Let's make the bar for success a little bit lesser than it was before. I guess just kind of hoping that the right combination of things would make them a little bit of money.
Now, this movie gets described as a standalone sequel. Now, normally a standalone sequel just means you don't have to have seen the first movie to understand the second one. You could probably make the argument something like The Dark Knight could be a standalone sequel if you really wanted to. I mean, you can see that movie without Batman Begins and it catches you up. But this is, other than Nicolas Cage being Johnny Blaze / Ghost Rider, there is nothing in common with that first movie. It doesn't straight up contradict it. It doesn't rewrite things too heavily, but there are no connective threads, no other cast returning, nobody on the creative side returning. If anyone else was playing the leading role, it would be a reboot. The only
Right.
reason they don't call it a reboot is because Nicolas Cage is back.
Yep. They don't bring a lot of characters back. The only character that is kind of brought back is recast. They ditched the name Mephistopheles and he goes by Rourke instead. But he is definitely implied to be the person that gives him the powers. So
Yeah, he's the
we're led to
devil.
believe this is, I guess, Peter Fonda's next form. So
Yeah, very strange. The original was written and directed by Mark Steven Johnson, who also wrote and directed Daredevil. We talked about both of those movies, but he does not return for the sequel in any capacity. This movie is written by the team of Scott M. Gimple and Seth Hoffman. As a duo, they would both go on to write on the series The Walking Dead and the spinoff Fear the Walking Dead. Seth Hoffman previously wrote on Prison Break, so a lot of TV credits to these guys' names. They come together to write this based on a story by David S. Goyer. Now, David S. Goyer,
no stranger to the comic book realm.
no stranger to Ghost Rider. He did have some work creatively in that first movie, but as we discussed, he at the end of the day was rewritten so much that he didn't even appear in the credits.
Right.
Becoming a ghost writer. Can I make that joke again? I made it last time, but it was really funny. Andrew was shaking his head.
More than usual.
This movie is directed by the team of Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor. Now, as a duo, they are most known for writing and directing Crank and the sequel Crank 2 High Voltage, starring Jason Statham. They also wrote and directed the movie Gamer, starring Gerard Butler. Andrew, those three movies, how many of those have you seen?
All of them.
Oh, wow. I've seen the first Crank. It's wild. I hear Crank 2 like really, they kind of settle into their groove and their style. I have not seen Gamer. I didn't realize it was the same creative team. I assume, Andrew, if I were to watch all those, it wouldn't be surprising that it's the same people making it, right?
Gamer, maybe. I feel like Gamer's a little bit more subtle, but it's still like really over the top. But yeah, the stuff that they're working on there, it's definitely a progression. And when they announced those guys were going to do Ghost Rider, I was like, oh wow, that could be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, that hectic, crazy, over the top style. I mean,
Mhm.
just look at Ghost Rider, right? That makes sense.
I agree. I legit I remember that being announced and thought that was a really cool choice,
Should say they also wrote Jonah Hex.
which I've also seen.
I have not, but I will someday,
We'll get there one day.
probably relatively soon. Yes, yes. Now, that's as a duo. Individually, Brian Taylor would also go on to direct the show Happy, which is a sci-fi show starring Christopher Maloney, and he befriends an animated unicorn voiced by Patton Oswalt. I've seen bits and pieces of this. Friend of the show, my wife, watched the show series. She really liked it, but it looked wild, and not surprised that there's a shared creative team among them.
Well, yeah, that's actually based off a Grant Morrison comic series, which, given that description, yeah, that tracks.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's a pretty good series. It's probably actually the the best thing he's individually done. But yeah, that Happy's definitely one worth checking out. I recommend it.
Let's talk about what happens in this movie, Andrew. Johnny Blaze, also known as the motorcycle riding supernatural superhero from Hell, Ghost Rider, is living as a hermit for fear that he can no longer control his urge to take sinners' souls. A man named Moreau, who seems to know a lot about Johnny's condition, recruits him for a mission to track down a boy named Danny and promises that in return, he will remove Johnny's satanic curse. Using his Hellfire abilities, Ghost Rider finds the boy and takes him to a group of isolated monks for protection and Moreau makes good on his promise and exorcises the spirit of vengeance from Johnny Blaze. But when the boy is taken from the monks by a demon named Blackout and taken to Danny's father, Rourke, the devil incarnate, Johnny must do whatever it takes to rescue the boy once more. There's a lot going on here, Andrew.
Yeah, there for a tight 95 minutes. This is a dense plot.
Let's talk about the players here. Let's go through the cast. And of course, we're going to start at the high point with the best casting, the best performance in this movie. We want to highlight one individual who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, let me ask you, who gets your Mark Strong Award for Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance?
It is with great honor and privilege that I am happy to announce that Nicolas Cage is now a Mark Strong Award winner.
Man, not just yes, but hell yes.
Hell yes.
Hell yes. We were so disappointed talking about that first movie that neither one of us gave it to Nicolas Cage because
Right.
it seems so obvious. Like, just be Nicolas Cage and we're gonna love you. And he's almost like restrained in that first
Right.
movie.
There's only a couple of scenes in that first one where he really like kind of wigs out. In this one, he's wigging out constantly.
And
He
it's
is
glorious.
He's going.
So good.
There's this whole scene where he's trying not to transform, basically, and it's like this weird werewolf type scene where he's like having to keep talking himself back down, and he's just losing his mind, and like he's shaky and he's jittery, and it's everything I wanted from him in the first movie.
Yes. Every famous Nicolas Cage mannerism and weird tick is 100% on full display in this movie. And I know exactly the scene you're talking about because you're right. It's like he's trying to prevent the rider from coming out. And every now and then, like a skull eyeball will pop out. Or you
Yeah,
start to
like
see it
half
come
his
through.
face changes or something.
And,
Yeah.
and he's like shaking it. He's trying to get information from this guy, and he's got him pinned against the wall. And he tells him, the only thing between you and the rider is me. And he's scraping at the door. He's scraping at the door. And if you don't tell me what I want to know, I'll let him out. And it's awesome.
I once heard Nicolas Cage's acting is described as like somebody handed him the script but removed all the punctuation.
Yeah, that's a good way. And not like you could kind of describe like Christopher Walken that way, right?
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing. It's
No.
it's like I would say you don't remove the punctuation, you switch it up. Exclamation points or question marks, commas or periods. Like you just jumble
And
it all up.
he has no barometer for like what his like level should be in the scene because
Yes.
it's wildly all over the place. But yeah, he's absolutely nuts in this movie. It's everything like I said, it's exactly what I wanted a Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider to be.
Yeah, I agree. It was perfect. They finally delivered that promise. When you first heard Nicolas Cage as Ghost Rider, first movie, his performance is fine. He's not bad. He's not bringing
Right.
it down, but you never quite got that promise until this movie, and it's awesome. I mean, there's some other stuff I like in this movie, but if it was just this performance, that alone is worth watching this movie and having a good time. So I agree.
Absolutely.
Mark Strong Award, Nicolas Cage, you deserve it. Finally. Now,
Can add that to his chest of trophies now.
I'm sure he is deeply honored.
I would be.
We should shoot him an email. There's like a 40% chance he would do our podcast. What does he say no to?
Nothing. We just can't offer him any money, so we'll see.
That's true.
It's like,
We can offer
yeah.
him a Mark Strong Award. I will 3D print a Mark Strong Award and give it to Nicolas Cage if he agrees to be on the podcast.
Perfect.
Now, there's other people in this movie, like Johnny Whitworth, who plays Ray Kerrigan, also known as the Demon Blackout. Andrew, you hate when I say actors look like other actors. This guy looks like Jim Carrey, but until he like transforms into Blackout, he doesn't look exactly like him. I'm not confusing him. He's not like real thin, skinny like Jim Carrey, but every time I saw his face, I'm like, I can't get past the fact that you kind of look like Jim Carrey.
Oh, I didn't have that problem because I remember this guy from Empire Records, but I very much know him as not Jim Carrey. But
Well, I don't. But that's probably a little
you
bit.
confuse some weird people, man.
I don't think so. I think it's very common. Like Kurt Russell and Jeff Bridges. Like
They look
a lot
nothing
of people
alike.
do. They are so whenever they are in westerns, they need to be in a western together. It'd be awesome. Yeah,
Yes, I agree with that. I don't agree they look the same.
Greg Kinnear and Gary Sinise. I am always mixing them up. Bill Pullman and Bill Paxton. That's the classic. Everybody in the 90s did that at some point.
I've never confused these people ever. I genuinely feel like I'm going crazy. I'm like, none of these people look alike at all.
Anyway, look, let's talk about Johnny Whitworth.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that I thought he kind of like Jim Carrey. About halfway through the movie, the devil gives him some extra abilities because he's getting his butt kicked by Ghost Rider. So he imbues him with, he simply says, the power of decay. And that's the only explanation we get. And that's all we need. It's very simple. He looks kind of like a zombie afterwards. Like he's decayed. Yeah. His hair's all long and stringy and like bleached out blonde, almost white. Kind of looks like the twins from The Matrix Reloaded.
A little bit.
Kind of looks like Lobo, which I know isn't Marvel. It's not what they're doing. But like, if they made a live action Lobo and he looked like this, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
I mean, he'd have black hair instead of white, but yes.
Not Andrew. See, that's comic book expert Andrew. That's what we need you for. But anything he touches decays, and he uses that obviously to
except one thing.
So there's a scene when he's driving, he's like reaching the passenger seat for something to eat, and he pulls out a sandwich, and it immediately gets all moldy and gross. And then he grabs an apple, and it rots in his hand. He's like, "Oh, that's weird." And then what does he grab next, Andrew?
He grabs a Twinkie.
And what happens to the Twinkie?
Nothing.
Because they can't decay. That was a genuinely funny moment.
I legit laughed at that. Yes.
I really like what he's doing here because he's like he's a demon that kills people by decaying their body. Like it's pretty gnarly. It's pretty brutal. But he's like, cool. This is awesome. Like he's literally like saying, like this fascinated.
He's having a good time with it.
Yeah, I like that. I like the vibe. This movie does not have a tone problem. We talk about this a lot where movies kind of, they want to be serious at one point and then goofy at another point and kind of gives you whiplash.
Yeah.
This movie's all out. It's just like Nicolas Cage's performance. It's just go with it. B to the W. Let's have a good time. Right. And if you're on board, I think you will have a good time.
I agree. I think if it's one thing this movie does have going for it, is it doesn't get confused. Like I said, it's 90 minutes and it's a dense movie for 90 minutes. There's a lot going on, but everybody here, by and large, knows exactly what they need to be doing and is having a blast with it.
Fergus Riordan plays Danny Ketch, who is essentially the devil's son and is central to the plot of this movie. He's who Ghost Rider repeatedly has to save and keep away from the devil. He's kind of a son, but also the devil is simply going to transfer his essence into the boy's body because we learned that every generation or so, the shell that he's in rots and it needs to transfer to a new youthful body, I guess. So,
yeah, it's a real Ghostbusters 2 type situation.
Exactly. Andrew, there's not a movie on earth that you can't relate to Ghostbusters.
It's not. If you work hard enough.
on the best of the rest bingo card, there's got to be a square that Andrew brings it back to Ghostbusters.
Always.
What I want to say though is Fergus here does a great job. A lot of times in movies when you have a kid, and I would guess he's 12, 13, somewhere around there, right? You might say like he's kind of good for a kid actor. We kind of give them a longer leash. We know it's hard to be a good actor. It's hard to be a kid actor. But he's just, I think straight up does a good job. Like you don't need any kind of qualifier for that. And he's asked to do some kind of ridiculous stuff. He's got to look vulnerable at times, look really tough at other times. And I think he nails it. And I never found myself doing that, wincing like, he's a kid.
He's fine. Yeah.
No. I thought he did a good job. I looked at his filmography. I didn't recognize. I don't think he's had
nothing else
as high profile as of yet, but hopefully we see him again because he does a good job.
I don't it looks like he hasn't really done anything for the last many years. I would assume who knows what he's off doing, but no, I think he does a good job right now. He plays this character named Danny, but I don't think you're ever given his last name in the movie. Now all of the credits, all of the promos, all of the everything say he's playing Danny Ketch, who eventually becomes the third Ghost Rider after Johnny. his usage here seems to be little more than just kind of a, hey, here's a name that you recognize type thing, because there's not really any connective threads between Danny here and what Danny Ketch typically is. But it's an interesting choice to kind of bring that in. But even just focusing on what he's doing here, because like I said, I think in the movie he's only ever called Danny. I don't think you get his last name, but he's doing a good job. Like you said, he's got a very interesting place of like, he's kind of got this path that's been decided for him by Rourke / Mephistopheles. And he does a good job reacting to the seriousness of that. The relationship he has with his mother feels genuine. The kind of banter he has with Johnny doesn't feel forced. He's wearing a lot of hats, and he has to put on a lot of different performances, and he does a good job with them.
Now, Kieran Hines plays Rourke, who basically is the devil. I know these movies like to call him Mephistopheles. He's the devil in a human form. And Andrew, there is no doubt in my mind that the casting director really wanted to cast Robert De Niro for this role.
You think so?
100%. Kieran could play Robert De Niro like in the streets of Vegas, like a street performer. He looks like Casino era Robert De Niro. Andrew, this is not the weird thing where I confuse actors together. This guy, I know this is a podcast, people can't see this, but his mouth is this the entire time. You get the sides that go down like Robert De Niro. He's dressed like him in Casino. He's got a suit. He's got his hair slicked back. 100%. On Twitter or something, I'm going to post a side by side of this character, Kieran as Rourke and Robert De Niro from Casino, and it's uncanny.
Hopefully you see those pictures next to each other and realize you should not do that.
No, you're gonna. I'm right. I'll fight to the death on this one. I
fight you to the death on this one. I don't feel that strongly about it,
but it's a thing where like Kieran Hines, he's been in a ton of stuff. Journeyman actor,
sure,
parts in all kinds of movies. You've seen him before. It's not like every time I see him, I'm like, oh wow, that's like poor man's Robert De Niro. But in this movie, he's playing great value Robert De Niro. Like he's made to look like him. Like I said, no doubt, going from Peter Fonda of that first movie, I can totally see them being like, another high profile actor come into this bit part, Robert De Niro. Oh, we can't get him. Let's get Kieran Hines and just do our best to give that Robert De Niro presence. 100% that's what happened behind the scenes.
I definitely don't feel as strongly about his performance or his appearance as you do, clearly. But I mean, I know we say this a lot, but he's fine. He's doing what's asked of him. There's not a whole lot going on with him here.
I mean, he's the devil. It's like there's depth to his character. He's not going to be sympathetic. Who has sympathy for the devil?
Mick Jagger? But no, the thing I think they do pretty well is, I don't know if this is a knock against the actor or not, but the idea is supposed to be that this vessel is starting to like weaken and fade and like start to deteriorate. So they're like really playing up that this guy does not look okay. And at one point, there's a scene where he's sitting with Danny and he's like, "You're wondering why I look like this." And I was like, I don't think you look really that different than how you normally look. What kind of comments are you making here?
It's not like he's not rotting. He's not he's not bleeding from the eyeballs or anything gross like that. He looks like an old dude. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure there was like a little bit of stuff they did to him, but I was really just kind of like, all right, okay.
I bet you're wondering why I look like this. Well, they wanted to cast Robert De Niro and they had to settle for me. Violante Placido plays Nadia Ketch, Danny's mother. Now, we learned that she made a deal with the devil, and in return, she had to have the devil's baby. That's essentially how Danny comes into being. So at the beginning of this movie, the two of them are on the run, always trying to elude the devil. They sort of have a mother and son scheme where you see him pickpocket a suitor for his mother.
She's portraying the mother who kind of used to be in these kind of bad circles with Kerrigan and has run into Idris Elba's Moreau before. So she's like tied into this world previously, has interacted with these characters, knows who they are. And when she's given the chance to have the devil's baby, she kind of sees that oddly as like her chance to like turn her life into something else. So she, at the beginning of this movie, they're hiding out in this kind of monastery. when Moreau shows up and basically is letting them know what's happening, so they escape. They're on the run, like you said, and you buy the relationship. It feels like they're a mother and son. She's doing a good job here. She's not completely on the sidelines either. She gets in on some of the action, which I always think is cool. I think she's good.
You just mentioned Idris Elba. Yeah, he's in the movie playing Moreau. It's crazy that we're this deep in the cast and just getting to Idris Elba. Not necessarily because this is a hugely stacked movie, just because in 2012, Idris Elba wasn't quite the worldwide star that he is today. So it's one of those things that's funny to go back and look at a bit of a smaller part for this actor. But man, who doesn't love Idris Elba on the screen, right?
Everyone loves Idris Elba.
His character is a bit of a drunk, but he's not like clumsy or anything. He just likes his wine. My note says, Idris Elba, what's that accent? He's another actor where in almost any two performances, he never sounds the same. Like he's in the Thor movies and has an Asgardian accent, whatever that means. He's doing whatever this accent is, which is still not his natural accent. Of course, he plays American characters sometimes with an American accent. He's all over the place, but super talented guy, always fun. Love him in this movie.
Yeah.
What is there to say?
Not much more. I mean, he's also, no stranger to comic book films, especially recently. Like you said, you mentioned Thor, and then he took a turn with the Suicide Squad just this year. So he's stuck around, reached some higher highs than this film.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's Idris Elba. He's great in everything. And I was curious about his character because I was not sure if he was going to stay with the good guys or not. He's kind of played a little vague for a lot of the movie, but he ends up sticking by the good guys, gets his moments, gets to do some cool stuff. And yeah.
In the beginning, he promises Johnny Blaze that he can remove the curse. And you expect a double cross at some point. Like he's promising him something that sounds too good to be true. And when the time comes, he does it. He's true to his word.
He is. And then he takes a 2,000-year-old bottle of wine they're going to go drink.
Yeah, he earned it. Christopher Lambert plays Methodius, who is one of the monks in this movie that they take Danny to for protection. And he is bald and his skin is like covered in some sort of writing. It's obviously not English. Kind of looks like Victor Zsasz from Batman, like a bunch of Italian marks. But at any rate, I did not immediately recognize Christopher Lambert because he is covered in all this makeup. But as soon as the man talked, I said, that is Raiden. Recognize that voice right away. And that's how I know him. Raiden, that's what I grew up with. I'm sure there's plenty of people that know him from Highlander and like, oh, that's the guy from Highlander. But at any rate, just what an iconic actor. Very tiny part in this movie, just a handful.
Oh, yeah.
If it wasn't Christopher Lambert, we probably wouldn't be talking about this character right now, but it is. So we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, he's in a bit part at the end of the kind of initial chase and rescue towards the end of the film. They take them to this kind of monastery hidden within these rocks in this canyon. It's really cool looking design. But these are basically the people they're going to keep Danny and all of them safe until the time passes that Rourke can no longer transfer his essence. This is apparently something that's about Danny's birthday, and if it passes, then he can't do it. Again, Ghostbusters 2. But they're played a little strangely, but then ultimately he's the one that does turn, and he's the one that does try to kill Danny, essentially, because basically, as far as he's concerned, he's like, the time is going to pass, but he still has all this power in him, and that's a bad thing. So
let's talk about this twist for a second. And we haven't even got to the scenes yet, but just to set this up, they take Danny. They have a mission to protect him, so they take him to these monks, and then Moreau fulfills his promise to Johnny Blaze. He takes away the curse, so Johnny Blaze no longer has the power of the writer. So once Johnny Blaze is powerless, they learned the monks actually want to kill Danny, but he's powerless to stop them. Right? Big twist.
Right.
Now they take him outside to do this ceremonial killing, I guess. And before they can, Blackout shows up and he kills all the monks and he takes Danny, which begs the question, why is that twist in the movie? Even if the monks were just going to protect him, once Johnny Blaze loses his power, Blackout would show up and kill them all and take Danny. It's
Yep.
just
No, I agree. It's not
It's-
something that makes a lot of sense because
it doesn't.
their
It's
twist-
not like a plot hole or anything.
Right,
It's just
but
like
it's just-
an extra twist. Just to
yeah,
be
it's an extra
twisty.
twist for the sake of twist. Yeah, it's a little, it's very odd because, like you said, it ultimately their twist means nothing because they all die and Danny gets taken anyway. So it's an odd choice.
I strayed a little too far from hashtag positivity podcast just then. I apologize for criticizing the movie so harshly. So I will say this. You know why I'm glad there's a twist there? Because then Christopher Lambert gets to be a bad guy. And even though Raiden's not a bad guy, that I can't even do a Christopher Lambert. That voice he has just is so much more fitting for a villain. Voice is good for a bad guy. I'll leave it at that. Well, Andrew, let's jump into the scenes of this movie, specifically the best scenes of the movie. That's what we do. Hashtag positivity podcast. We want to scrub through these movies that were poorly received and talk about everything that works. We've hit a lot of high points already, but what I want to know from you, Andrew, is what is the best scene in this movie? When is it firing on all cylinders? See what I did there?
Haha. Yes.
Andrew, what's your favorite scene in the movie?
My favorite scene in the movie is probably the scene at the mining site where Danny has been kidnapped for the first time, essentially, and they find out where he's at. So Ghost Rider shows up to fight Kerrigan, who is not yet Blackout at this point. And so he shows up as Ghost Rider. They've got these nasty guns. But the thing this movie plays a little fast and loose with is that, like, Johnny can, like, Ghost Rider any vehicle he's in. Like, if he's driving a truck, suddenly it's on fire and it's all crazy. If he's driving a motorcycle, it's all on fire and it's crazy.
I like your use of Ghost Rider as a verb.
As a
I'm gonna
verb, yes.
Ghost Rider this vehicle.
So what he does in this scene at a certain point is he Ghost Riders a Bagger 288, which is an excavator, and it's giant. Those things are like
cool. Yeah.
those things are like 30 million pounds, and they're like 50 feet high and 100 feet long. And so he's literally there. The excavating wheels are all lit on fire. It's ridiculous. It's insane. It's over the top. And I was like, this is dope.
So cool. Yeah. So this scene, also my favorite scene in the movie, by the way. I could have picked almost any of the action scenes of this movie,
Right.
and the Ghost Rider scenes. I think they're all super cool, really well done. But this one just gets the most bonkers. So I got to highlight this one.
Oh, yeah.
It comes right after he interrogates that guy. We talked about scene already. He's scraping at the door. That scene where he's holding the rider in. When he finds out where Danny is, he takes off down the road on a motorcycle, and he finally lets the rider come through. And so we have this transformation scene while he is driving down the road. And the transformation scenes, again, this movie has like nothing in common with the first one. The transformation scenes in the first one looked great. It was one of my favorite parts about the movie. You could see like the layers of his skin going down through the muscle, down to the skull, light on fire. Very cool. They don't do anything like that. Instead, it's like it's like Natural Born Killers. It's like a scene from Natural Born Killers. If you've ever seen that movie, which is just bonkers. And Natural Born Killers itself is sort of almost like music video inspired. Like the visuals are more important than the narrative. Anyway, what I'm getting at is it gets wild. There's almost like a fisheye lens on him on the motorcycle. He's shaking his head back really rapidly. The skull is coming through. It's just like a bonkers, trippy scene as he's driving down the road, transforming with heavy metal music playing. It's perfect. It's Ghost Rider. It's like the right tone,
awesome.
like we were talking about. It's so good. And Ghost Rider's look, we should talk about this. He looks totally different from that first movie.
And I think he looks awesome in this movie.
Yeah,
Like,
he looks
I
rad.
love that look. It's like, it's awesome.
I like the look in the first movie, but this one, like his skull is black and his
Yes.
clothes are like covered in ash.
And they're like charred and they look like it's leather. So it's all kind of melted in some places.
Yeah,
and like,
yeah. It
it's
looks so
awesome.
good. Yeah.
And like the fire effect on his head is like, because in the first one, they're very clearly trying to invoke the classic Ghost Rider image. They're trying like it's all like normal, clean, pressed clothes. Like he doesn't look ragged when he's got it. He's got the skull, he's got the skeleton hands, and then the head's on fire. And it's a very like classic. If you're going to take the page and take it to screen, this is essentially what you're looking at. With this one, I don't really want to say they try to go more grounded with it, but they are definitely trying to limit the effects usage here. So he's got gloves on. I don't think you ever see a flaming skull hand until the end.
Yeah.
I think other than that, he's got gloves on. But the only effect really is his head. Everything else is like just they make a great look for him. But then, like I said, the skull is black, like it's actually been on fire. But then I actually think, like, I saw one of the criticisms of this movie was the CGI, and I'm like,
I did too. It looks great. I don't know.
I didn't see anything that was like really that out of place for me. And like, but the fire effect too, like they really do a good job with it of like making it actually act like a match, like it reacts to the wind and stuff, and like you see it go down, and like it's kind of just the black skull and stuff, and it's just extremely cool looking. Like it's definitely something where I'm like, that is an upgrade as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
As far as making him look awesome.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I love his look. I love his mannerisms as the Ghost Rider. He's always like toying with his victims.
Oh yeah.
And in this scene, they do something bizarre, and I want to know your take on this. They're, firing everything they have at him. Of course, Ghost Rider's invulnerable; it's not going to hurt him. And then they throw a grenade. The grenade goes off, and it fills the screen with white. And then, as the dust settles, Ghost Rider is floating like 6 feet above the ground, slowly spinning in a circle. And I don't know why. And then
I have no idea why.
He stops, he stares the bad guy down, and then he flies over to him. Whenever that happened, whenever it stopped and he was sitting there spinning, I was like, what did I miss? Like, am I supposed to understand this? I guess it's like I was just saying. I guess he's just toying with him. I guess he's like playing dead or just being weird. I don't know. It's just,
I have no idea.
It looks strange. It looks maybe unsettling if you were there. And it's kind of what I was going back to earlier. Like the visuals are what's important, not really the narrative purpose. It's just cool imagery. It is, music video style, but in the best way possible. Sometimes that can be like an insult to a movie, but I think they use it very well here. And yeah, it's just a very strange effect. And then right after that, he's floating, and then he zooms over to one of the bad guys. The bad guy just unloads into a skull with his machine gun, and Ghost Rider just opens up his mouth and takes in all the bullets, and then he spits them back out.
Basically lava vomits on this dude. It's like takes all that molten metal and just spits it right back at him. It's just all of the Ghost Rider stuff in this movie is so cool looking. I legit, people criticize the CGI, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was like, this, this is a decade old now, and I'm still not seeing a whole lot of stuff where I'm like, that's dated. I think the smaller scale and limiting the usage of it. So the only stuff that's really like insane is Ghost Rider's head and his bike and stuff like that. I'm like, I actually think they made the most out of that, and it actually looks pretty good by and large.
Sometimes we talk about these movies and they almost get like over ambitious with the technology at the time.
Yeah.
Daredevil in 2003 doing, fully CG bodies it did not age well. But this, like, other than like fire effects, that's really it. They light stuff on fire, basically.
Yeah.
That's about all there's to it. Otherwise, it's practical, it's makeup. His skull obviously is CG, but yeah, they don't get carried away. I think it all holds up really well.
Awesome. You're telling me they didn't really rip his skin off and light his head on fire? What a bunch of amateurs.
I looked up some behind the scenes, and they did not do that. It's
what a mistake.
I agree. I thought the movie looked awesome. That scene is rad. Like all the action scenes. The very first time we see Ghost Rider, he shows up. There's Kerrigan, the bad guys, and they have Danny, and he just rides his motorcycle in, and then he just stands there. He just stands there in the middle of everybody, and they're all kind of looking at each other, what's going on, and he's just swaying left and right. Doesn't say anything, doesn't move. He's just toying with them. Like so something fun and interesting. The very beginning of this movie, instead of saying Marvel,
it says
Marvel Knights, which is an imprint of Marvel. Andrew, real quick, what is the Marvel Knights imprint? What does it represent? What does it mean?
Marvel Knights at the time was meant to be kind of a specific brand of books that were supposed to be kind of on the darker, edgier side of things. Daredevil was one of the Marvel Knights.
Punisher.
Ghost Rider was, Punisher was another one, but yeah, it was kind of an imprint. Not to the level of something like DC's current Black Label, which is basically their shorthand for, hey, this is a mature audience's superhero book. But like this was Marvel kind of being like, here's something that's a little darker, a little edgier. And that was the branding they used for it. So I was surprised to see that actually put at the front of this instead of just like Marvel Comics. I thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of the other movies did. It's the only time I can think of seeing Marvel Knights like in front of a movie. And I think they stay true to that. Like they live up to that, not in the sense that he's dropping F-bombs and it's unnecessarily R-rated. There's not a bunch of nudity, but he's a bit of a true vigilante, not necessarily the good guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's Ghost Rider. That makes sense for Ghost Rider.
Yep.
If anything, I don't want to keep going back to the first movie like we're not hot on it because I did enjoy it. And you can go back and listen to that episode. Like I did enjoy a lot of things about that movie, but it's sort of like they took Ghost Rider and they kind of molded and formed him into a more traditional superhero origin. Whereas this one, they're letting him just be Ghost Rider.
Yeah, it's the first one feels, I don't mean this I don't mean this really in derogatory way, but it feels like if we're doing like kind of a paint by numbers Ghost Rider story by everything, that's kind of how the first movie comes off. I think there's great moments in it, but with this one, it really does feel like they were like, you know what? Let's just lean into everything. Let's embrace the ridiculousness. Let's let Cage be Cage. Like, let's really go hard on this thing. And I think it works more than it doesn't.
Another big change from the first one, not just Ghost Rider's look, but his voice, which his voice sounded really cool in the first one. Again, I'm not attacking that one. They took Nicolas Cage's voice, they put a bunch of effects over it and made it sound really otherworldly. In this one, there's still some effects, but Ghost Rider like whispers. He's got like a whisper voice, and it's intimidating in an entirely different way. Now, at the end of the scene, we're talking about our favorite action scene. He's showing up to rescue Danny, but they don't really know that. And Danny and his mom like take off, and he has to go after him on his motorcycle. And he pulls up next to her. She's like in a van, and he pulls up next to her on the highway driving his motorcycle and looks over at him. And I got like Terminator 2 vibes. And I think there's like a parallel there because again, Terminator, good guy, bad guy, kind of depends on context. Right. Same one here. There's this super powerful being trying to protect this boy. I mean, there's some obvious parallels there, you know?
No, I agree. And it's that very much that idea of like, people don't realize that about T2 so much, where you don't necessarily know that Arnold's the good or the bad guy immediately.
Right.
Because now it's easy to look back and be like, oh yeah, he's the good guy. We all know he's the good guy. But like watching that movie for the first time, you're not going to know that. And in fact, your only frame of reference is going to be the first movie where he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that scene in the hallway, like, I don't know, other than audiences like seeing that movie opening day, no one gets to feel the real tension of that scene in the hallway where it's the T-1000 and Arnold Schwarzenegger coming down the hallway and Edward Furlong stuck in the middle and he doesn't have anywhere to go. Like that, the intention of that scene is lost on audiences forever because we all know that, you know, ultimately Arnold's the good guy.
Well, right. It's like Vader telling Luke that he's his father. Like, I can't imagine what that would have been like with no frame of reference. Like actually watching that movie and seeing that unfold and being like, what?
Yeah.
It's stuff that we don't think about just because these things are so ingrained into the pop culture zeitgeist or whatever you want to call it.
Thankfully, I did get to experience what you're talking about there when I saw Toy Story 2 and I found out Zurg was Buzz Lightyear's father. I think that was comparable to what audiences were feeling in The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some circles, some might say it's got a greater impact.
So at the beginning of this movie, get the Marvel Knights logo, and then it catches us up on the story. It doesn't necessarily recap the first movie, but some of the events happen to line up. It's just telling you kind of the idea of Ghost Rider. And it is animated in a super cool style. Yeah. I would love a Ghost Rider movie completely animated in this style. I mean, animated. Why isn't there is there an animated Ghost Rider movie? There should be. Like
there might be. I don't know.
Make it happen, Marvel. But
no, I like
at any
it.
rate, I like them kind of catching us up. They're just telling you all you need to know about them. And again, they don't quite contradict things from the first movie, but they do make some changes. In that first movie, Ghost Rider is very much a superhero, very much a good guy. Whenever he confronts bad guys, what did he do? He made them feel all the suffering they made their victims
Right.
feel.
The penance stare.
Yeah. What he does now is suck out their soul. And he makes it very clear. It doesn't matter if you've killed someone or simply told a white lie or had an illegal download. If he catches you, he sucks out your soul. And that is pretty gnarly. That's why he's in hiding at the beginning of this movie. So his powers, what he's doing with them, are a bit different, but the basis is still there. He signed a deal with the devil to save his dad. His dad died anyway, but now he has this Ghost Rider curse.
Yeah, it's portrayed a lot more like the Ghost Rider is like a real Jekyll and Hyde situation, where in the first movie it's a lot less of that. There's still this antagonistic side, but in this one it's straight up like, if I transform, I'm completely out of control and I can't help you. Like I've lost it at that point.
It's very much like he's referencing the Rider as a completely separate character.
Right.
He's like, well, when it's the Rider, when he comes out, yeah, I'm not in control. You're right. It's very different.
So they do try to build on his mythology a little bit by digging into the origins of the Rider and like what it comes from and what it means and how it came to be. And some of that stuff's kind of interesting. And it ultimately reveals that depending on whether you're bad or good, I guess the color of fire changes.
Yeah, so the Rider was originally a spirit of justice, like an actual angel, before getting under the influence of the devil and mutated and twisted to the spirit of vengeance. So almost like underneath it all is maybe some good. It's kind of what they're implying there and what they come around to in the finale of this movie. Is that true to the comics? Is that something the movie fabricated, or
I don't think so, because in the comics, I'm pretty sure Zarathos is just a demon.
Zarathos is the spirit of justice in this movie?
Well, Zarathos has always been kind of meant to be. In the comics, he's a separate person. In this movie, they imply that that's who is the spirit of vengeance. Ultimately, that itself is another switch. Because like I said, in the comics, Ghost Rider is over here, Zarathos is over here. In the movie, they implied that Zarathos is behind Ghost Rider and like is the spirit of vengeance that guides him, and so he's the one that gets the modifications. But yeah, he's just a demon.
Okay,
he's not. There's nothing else to him.
Another thing I appreciate about that recap is it is narrated by Nick Cage, and we've talked a lot about how fun it is to hear him talk. I love he says, "I'm the guy that made a deal with the devil." Like just those random fluctuations that he makes.
Yeah, it's like it's like random words are just capitalized when he reads the script. Like he just sees like I'm the guy that made a deal with the devil. It's like it stops being capitalized halfway through. It's good. It's fantastic. That we get a couple of those. We get a couple of those animated like recap sequences, and they're all very cool. The art style is really almost looks jock-ish, like that kind of the harsh style, like the harsher angular lines, and stuff like that. I liked it. Like I said, I like that a lot. I don't know if I could watch a whole movie of that, but for the purpose of this, it's very cool.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the cutscenes from Twisted Metal 2. If you've ever beat Twisted Metal 2 and you get the animated ending of Calypso fulfilling your wish, that's exactly what it reminds. And it makes,
that's a deep cut.
Yeah. Instead of a skull on fire, Twisted Metal 2 was a clown head on fire. Very close.
Very close. Basically the same thing. Some would say even inspired by. No.
So you're right. There's a few animated sequences that kind of catch you up with things. And one of them is explaining this character of Rourke, which I've said is the devil incarnate. Mm-hmm. And they're explaining that the devil has always had like a living being on this planet, but he has to transfer his essence from body to body, and it goes through, like, I think Joseph Stalin is one of the images that it shows, like all the different people that have actually been the devil. And there's a punchline here because at the very end it shows Jerry Springer implying that he's the devil. I don't know if that was before the character of Rourke became the devil, or
maybe it was a brief interlude, who knows. But yeah, that was a bit of a strange one.
Not quite, Twinkie level of comedy, but I appreciated the attempt.
I had the subtitles on when I was watching it because I do that a lot now. But
because you're old?
Yeah, and I can't see. Which would be why I
We
want to
can't
add
see.
more stressors to seeing. But no. At one point, I think it is in the lead up to the construction scene, or maybe it's the lead up to the last scene. But at one point, when they're like standing and they hear the engine off in the background, the subtitle was "Ghostly Engine Whirring," and I was like, "Well, that's fantastic."
Ghostly engine. I love the idea that if someone has the subtitles on because they're hearing impaired and they need the help, that describing it as a ghostly engine. Like if
What does
it
that
helps
tell you exactly? Like,
I don't know. It's pretty awesome.
like, is that gonna help you? I don't.
It's got to be a fun job writing those descriptions, writing those descriptors, coming up with ways to describe a ghostly engine. I love it. Some more Terminator 2 vibes because Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze is now kind of bonding with Danny while he's taking him to these monks. And, Danny grew up without a father, and Johnny Blaze doesn't have any kids. And they're at this diner. And Danny is kind of looking off in the distance at this father and son that's there, and they're having a good time. They're eating like a happy meal, and the father like tussles his son's hair. And Johnny is coming back with the food, and he's watching this, and he sees Danny, and he sees that family, and he sits down in front of Danny, and he just reaches out and tussles his hair, and Danny kind of looks at him like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "There's a bee. It was gonna sting your face." Just trying to play it off while he was brushing his hair. It's the best kind of. Nicolas Cage is great when he's going like ridiculous and over the top. There's inflections that we talked about, but also just the man can't talk normally. Like even when he tries to be like unassuming, it's just so entertaining.
That scene is really funny. Like Nick Cage is just like, it's so weird because like you can see here that like I'm like, I get why this dude got famous, because like there are things he does that are genuinely entertaining and great. And that scene was great. There's another scene where they're sitting on the back of the truck, where they're kind of sitting with his motorcycle. And this was the one that I remember seeing like all over the place when this movie came out. Because basically Danny asks him, he's like, "What if you have to pee while you're Ghost Rider?" And Nick Cage is just like, "It's awesome. It's like a flamethrower." And then we get this shot of him like with his back to the camera, seemingly like urinating, and it legit is just like a flamethrower. It never happens in the film. I kept thinking they were gonna like bring it back, but like all we get is like another shot of that footage. But like
in the final fight with the Rourke, he should have flamethrower pissed on him. I would have been on board. That would have been great. Yeah, I love that scene because at first it's just Nicolas Cage jumps up on his feet all excited. It's like a flamethrower, and he like puts his hands by his crotch and he's mimicking it. And then switches to a view of his back, and it switches to like it's all black background, and now he's in Ghost Rider get up and pissing fire, and he looks over his shoulder at Danny and like nods his head like, "Yeah, this is cool," right? And it is.
It is. I can't say that it wasn't.
It's one of those things like because I've seen that scene get like mocked and stuff,
right? Yeah.
If it was in the middle of a different movie, if like in the middle of Avengers, if like the Hulk made a joke about
peeing green or something, and
he mimicked it. It was super weird and out of place. But like, because this movie has this wacky tone and it is always died up to 11. It's great. Like I think it's awesome. It's a lot of fun. I mean, if it's not for you, if you've watched this movie and you're like, "That's dumb," I'm not gonna say you're wrong. Like I'm not gonna tell you like that you're wrong for that take. But I was on board personally. I thought it was great.
I'm gonna say it. This movie's not bad. This movie's a good time if you want it to be. This is one of the movies.
Sometimes the critic score is really low, the audience score is really high. I would have expected that from this movie. I would expect people to be like, it's not winning awards, whatever. I had a fun time. I'm gonna give it a high score. I should get on Rotten Tomatoes and leave a high score.
Like I was kind of like gearing up to watch this one, and I'm not gonna, hashtag positivity podcast, but sometimes I have to psych myself up to watch
Yeah.
certain things to be like, all right, we're going in. But like with this one, I started out that way, but like almost immediately, like the minute I saw Ghost Rider for the first time, I was like, man, he looks dope as hell. And
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, this is like, and then like the way he was fighting and like Nicolas Cage just going like full Nicolas Cage. I was like, man, I am. And then Idris Elba shows up, and then Christopher Lambert shows up, and I'm just like, this is the greatest movie of all time.
It's very good, and it's 90 minutes. It does not overstay its welcome. Yeah,
Yep.
if it was like over 2 hours, this would
Yeah.
probably get old. But it's just like, I feel like I'm like a generic movie reviewer just trying to get on the cover of a poster, or it's a high octane blast, or it's an adrenaline rush from start to end. The stuff that gets
From start to beginning.
Yeah, start to beginning. Then it starts to go downhill. No, it's awesome.
It's a
And that-
blast.
it loves that flamethrower shot because it comes back later. Like you said, Rourke is talking to Danny, and he says, "I bet you're wondering why I look like this," which we're not, but whatever. And he gives him an analogy, and what he's gonna say is, imagine a flamethrower that's made of paper mache, right? It burns up from the inside. That's the analogy he's trying to get out. But whatever he says, imagine a flamethrower. It flashes back to the scene of Ghost Rider pissing fire, and Danny laughs like he's remembering seeing that image. And Rourke is like, "What are you laughing about?" Anyway, it's like a flamethrower.
It's such a needless gag, but it works. I had no problems with it.
Yes. The final showdown with Rourke, man, there's a lot of stuff I liked here. So Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze no longer has the abilities, and I love that he comes to the ceremony where Rourke is transferring his essence to Danny, and he just runs up to Rourke and punches him in the face. Like, he doesn't have any powers or anything. He just socks him, and he goes down. Like, it works. Like, it takes him out for a while.
Because they make a point at saying that, like, when he's in the human form, he's got limitations, especially now with like the decaying form. And like that, it's just very cathartic to just have him walk up and punch him in the face.
Punch the devil in the face.
And then he even says, he's like, "I felt good." But yeah, it's that whole sequence is also just really cool because like Nadia even asks him, she's like, "You don't have your powers anymore. Why are you invested in this?" And he's like, "I told Danny he was going to be okay." He's like, I need to make sure that he's going to be okay. And so he runs in with no powers, which, that's what heroes do. Yeah. And he gets to make some fun quips. And then him and Idris Elba take on this entire audience of weird secret society members, and they destroy all of them. It's awesome. But ultimately, the thing that Danny realizes is that because Rourke is going to take his form, Danny already has a lot of his powers because of the nature of what's going to happen. So Danny is the one that's able to give the powers back to Nicolas Cage after he gives them up earlier in the film. But this seems to change the dynamic slightly. He seems to be more powerful and possibly a little bit more in control as well. Yeah. Because later on, he doesn't, when Nadia shows up kind of when everything's done, Ghost Rider is standing there in daylight now too, which he wasn't able to do before either. And he's not just going after her. He's able to hold it in and not just needlessly attack people. So that whole sequence is very cool because Danny kind of like vomits fire onto his face.
It's one of the reasons. That's probably when I took the note that like this kid playing Danny is like really good.
Yeah.
Is this ridiculous he's being asked to do? He runs over Nicolas Cage. He jumps up like on his chest, puts his hands on his collar, and opens his mouth. And all this hellfire comes out of his mouth and into Johnny Blaze, getting the powers back. And it looks rad with all the special effects. But on set, Danny, he's like yawning into his
like
face.
Screaming in his face. Yeah.
But it comes out looking super rad. He gets his power back. A lot of cool stuff happens here. Sadly, Moreau dies.
Yes.
Elba. The character Blackout, which we'll get to a minute about the comic book counterpart, Andrew, but I like what they're doing here. Anytime he uses his powers, like when he kills all those monks, the entire look of the movie changes. Right. It goes completely black, and then it's like this harsh black and white. The characters are shown in like a harsh black and white. I don't know how to describe it because it's not like Sin City, but it's
more like the characters are normal, but the entire setting is black now. It's not stylized like Sin City. it really is just like I'm standing in front of a black screen, but I look completely normal. But it's done very well, and it's a
Yeah.
cool effect because it seems like if you're looking on the outside, you're not seeing it, but the people that are fighting him do see it. Like it's the way it's the kind of cut back and forth between. I thought was really cool.
So to me, it's kind of like I was saying earlier, like, it's not so much about making sense narratively, just having a strong visual.
Yeah.
It's we've seen a lot of movies. We talked about a lot of movies where they try to mimic the comic book style and feel. And The Spirit is one of them. Sin City, obviously, Hulk and all of its panels. And I think for the most part, like, that is a wasted effort. Like, don't even try, just make it a movie most of the time. But there's times when I think it actually works. Sin City, I think, is a great example. They go all in and it works. Here, I think it works. It's not every single transition in the movie. It's not every single frame of the movie. They're not constantly trying to be a comic book. But this is a great example of something that would make sense in the printed page, and it still works here.
Right.
When you're reading a comic book, if suddenly one panel is all black and white, someone's using their powers, it's totally fine. The entire background can be the word,
boom,
smash, boom. Yeah. And it's fine. It makes sense. And I think this works here. Anytime he's using his powers, the visuals totally change. And I think it's always rad. Now, whenever he kills Idris Elba's character, he goes out like a freaking champ. Like, he grabs him, and Idris Elba, Moreau, he starts decaying. And then he just rears his head back, and he gives him a huge headbutt. And Idris Elba's head shatters. It kills him. But he gets like one last, punch in. He staggers him, makes him take a few steps back. So he literally goes out swinging. I really like
I think he says, I can still see the light or something like that.
Yeah.
And then Blackout kind of being Blackout about it, just like spitting out the dust or whatever. And he's like, gross.
Yeah. There's a Wilhelm scream at some point in this fight. Yeah. All of a sudden, we've had like 3 movies recently with a Wilhelm thrown in there. So if you're going to put it in any superhero movie, this is one.
I would say that this is definitely one where you should do it. Yes.
After that last fight with Rourke, there's still one loose end to tie up because Blackout is still alive. And this final fight, it's not super long. It actually takes place like on a highway. They're all like in vehicles in a high speed chase. And Ghost Rider and Blackout end up fighting like on the roof of the cars. And Blackout tries to kill Ghost Rider. I don't know how you can make a skull decay, but this is when Ghost Rider realizes like he can be out in the sunlight because the sun rises, and Blackout has him like by the neck on the hood of the car. And, the scene goes black like it does when Blackout's about to kill somebody. Ghost Rider doesn't die, and instead just like fires everything he has at Blackout and sends him flying off the car. He gets run over by another vehicle, and you got a shot of him like tumbling on the road, and he's clearly dead. And it goes back to Ghost Rider, and you're waiting for the quip. And what does he say? Roadkill.
Yep.
Not bad. Pretty good.
Not bad. Yeah.
7 out of 10 quip. Yeah. Lights Out would have been a good one.
Yes.
Blackout.
That definitely would have been better.
Okay. 9 out of 10 movie, but if you would have said Lights Out, 10 out of 10.
12 out of 10.
They were that close.
So close.
Yeah, then we get this final scene in the daylight, like you mentioned. And Danny is seemingly dead. He's unconscious. And then Ghost Rider carries him to his mom, puts his hand on him, which is, you see a skeleton hand for the first time, and the fire is blue now. And he gives him life because now he has the spirit of justice, not the spirit of vengeance, kind of what they're implying there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure, side note here, I'm pretty sure Nicolas Cage was not on set at the same time as Danny and his mom. They don't appear any shots together. When Ghost Rider is walking up to him with Danny, like he has the skull head and hand. It's not, doesn't have to be Nicolas Cage. And then while he's kneeling down in front of him, there's a close up of Nicolas Cage talking, a close up of her talking, never an establishing shot with all of them together. Just something I noticed. But the last line of the movie, just take a note of what it is, Andrew.
No, go ahead.
He says, "Hell yes."
Yes.
That makes up for the roadkill.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And then there's a shot of him riding down the highway on his motorcycle with blue fire trailing him. Pretty cool. Kind of sets up like a new status quo for the character.
Yes, it does. The idea that maybe now, not just is he kind of more powerful, but also it's a different mission, and he might possibly be more in control now, have more say over what the Ghost Rider does, and all of that too. Yeah, it's an interesting setup for a movie that never comes.
Yeah. Other than the fact that the first movie does tell his origin, it's almost like he could reverse these two movies because now he's in control. Because the first movie is not losing control when he becomes Ghost Rider. He's not killing
Right.
innocent people like he's in the beginning of this movie. So it's almost like this movie he learns to control his power, and then he could play like the second half of the first movie, which taking on another one of the Devil's Sons or whatever the story was there, taking on Legion.
Yeah. It's an interesting kind of switch because they really do go hard on in this movie about the idea that he really can't control this. And then in the first movie, you're not like the first movie definitely implies that if he's in a place with bad people, he will transform, but it's only going after like the wicked. That's
Right.
the whole line. It's the wicked. In this movie, he changes that to like literally everything. It reminds me a bit of what DC has done with the Spectre sometimes, because the Spectre is this character in DC that is the spirit, God's spirit of vengeance, basically, that attaches itself to a person. It's been a bunch of different people: Jim Corrigan, Hal Jordan, Crispus Allen. But there's a period of time where he gets split and he has no host, and he's basically like this thing is just out there going nuts, and it's doing that kind of thing where like everything is on the table. There is no differentiation. He's going nuts and going after everybody. And the whole idea is the host is supposed to like ground it back down. So he's only going after the real things. So oddly enough, this movie is called The Spirit of Vengeance. So it's just employing a very similar kind of idea there of just the spirit of vengeance really is unchecked. But by the end of this movie, we appear to have checked it.
That's what I should have said in the synopsis. In this movie, Ghost Rider learns to check spirit of vengeance. So how does this function as an adaptation, Andrew? Because we surmised that the first one, you kind of repeated earlier, is kind of a paint by numbers Ghost Rider, not a betrayal to the source material by any means. But as far as the tone of the character and his stories and characters like Blackout, how would you summarize this movie functions as an adaptation?
It misses the mark on more than a few things. I would definitely say that like the manic kind of bordering on satire energy of this film is not really what Ghost Rider does. This was supposedly the Neville Dean and Taylor said this was inspired by a comic called Ghostbuster.
You can't help yourself, Andrew.
I can't. It was Neville Dean and Taylor said that this movie was inspired by a comic called Ghost Rider Road to Damnation, which is by Garth Ennis and Clayton Crane. But it's really not, because the whole premise of Road to Damnation is Ghost Rider is in hell, basically, and he's trying to get out. And so he races across one end of hell, trying to get to the gates every night, with the idea that if he gets to the gates, he gets out. And that's the premise of the whole book. And the book ends with him very much still stuck there. So this, giving you that synopsis of what Road to Damnation is, you can see there's really none of that's here. None of it's here. He's not in hell. He's not doing any of that. So it's really not at all inspired by that. But Blackout is an appearance and name thing only. Nothing else about Blackout is like the character is in the comics. We're just, like I said, we're using the name and kind of the look. It's got a similar look going, but we've switched up a lot of that. Danny Ketch, obviously, I explained, is that's not really how Danny is in the comics. So we've made a lot of departures. I'm not going to pretend that we haven't. And if that's your breaking point with the film, I can't fault you for that, because it really is something that plays very fast and loose with it. The only thing you've really got that's hitting the mark is you've got Johnny Blaze's Ghost Rider. And I think his manic energy kind of works for it, but Ghost Rider has been played a lot more straight in various things. So this is definitely something where I could see it not being for everyone if you're a Ghost Rider purist, which I'm sure you're out there. But yeah, it's definitely taken a lot of pieces, switched them up. Like David Goyer knows his comics. I'm not going to say that he doesn't, and I don't know how much of this is his original script versus the rewrite. So there's really no way to know like where a lot of these changes come from. But yeah, I'm not going to pretend that this is some sterling translation of the material. It's just not. I just don't think that gets in the way of the film.
Well said, Andrew. And I think that does it for Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance talk. Likely the last time we will be talking about Ghost Rider. Nicolas Cage has said that he is done with the character. And given how much time has passed since this one and Nicolas Cage's age, I doubt that'll happen. Now, if they make an animated Ghost Rider movie, I hope he returns to do the voice. That would be awesome. But otherwise, the book seems closed on solo Ghost Rider movies. Marvel has the rights. They've used the Robbie Reyes version and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And who knows if we'll see Johnny Blaze in the MCU. Who knows? It'll be fun to see. But
we're cracking open that multiverse. Who knows, man?
Who knows? Anything's possible, I guess. Have you seen the Robbie Reyes version? After our first episode, Ghost Rider episode, somebody sent me a link to a scene from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with Robbie Reyes, and it was pretty cool. It was a cool look. I like I don't know anything about that character, about that version of the character, but I like the idea.
I actually haven't watched it. I fell out with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. pretty early on. I know Robbie Reyes is a much more recent creation. I think he's literally created in the 2010s. So he's somebody that's definitely not like, there's not 50 years of history or even 30, 40 years of history. So I might have to go check it out because I like me some Ghost Rider.
I highly suggest you check it out. And I highly suggest that everyone leaves us a review on Apple Podcast. Yes, everyone. Even if you don't have an iPhone, you have a friend that does. Take it out of their hands, log in to Apple Podcast, and leave us a review. Go one step farther, leave a review for every podcast that you listen to regularly. It's simple, it's free, it's easy, it's fun, and your podcast hosts are certainly going to appreciate it. We appreciate reading some nice words about us, but you know what? Whatever you write in that review, you can bet we are going to read it in an episode of the podcast. So you want us to say something ridiculous? That's a way that you can do it. If there is a comic book movie that you like that was poorly received upon release, we want to know about that too. What are your favorite scenes? Who gives the best performance? Send us a message. You can email us bestoftherestpod@gmail.com, or you can hop into our Discord. There is a link in the episode description. Tell us all about it. When we cover that movie, we're going to read your thoughts on the episode. Even if it's a movie we likely won't cover, we'd like to know what your Mark Strong Award winners are. Andrew, I just saw Free Guy the other day. You've seen that, right?
Yep.
Taika Waititi gets the Mark Strong Award from me for that movie.
I think I tacitly agreed with you on that as well, just because he really gets to go out there in a wild way that nobody else really gets to. But yeah,
I mean, everybody does a good job.
Right.
It was a fun time. It was a good movie, but yeah, he is unleashed in a similar way to Nicolas Cage in this movie. He kind of gets the feeling he gets some ad-libbing on set, and well put. It's very entertaining. It was a good time.
Yeah, I had a good time with that one. I did see I did watch Scream 3 last night.
Okay, willingly? That was what you chose to put on? Okay.
Liz wanted to watch a Scream movie, and she's like, I remember the first one. And I know she and I have watched the fourth one. She was like, I was like, all right, we're going to watch the third one. Now, Scream 3 is the weakest of that franchise by a large margin. But Patrick Warburton shows up in it, and Scott Foley shows up in it, and Josh Pais shows up in it. Josh Pais, for those who are not aware, is both the suit actor and voice of Raphael from the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. He shows up in this movie not as a Ninja Turtle.
You got a Mark Strong Award from me for that first Ninja Turtles movie.
Yeah, so stacked cast, really. But yeah.
And who gets the Mark Strong Award for Scream 3, Andrew?
It probably goes to, I don't know, maybe David Arquette. We'll give it go a little bit on the outside there.
Okay.
Current pro wrestler David Arquette.
And of course, remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. We certainly appreciate it. It's the only way we're going to grow. And follow us on social media at DOTRcast. Thank you. Let's talk about what happens in this movie, Andrew. Nicolas Cage is Ghost Rider. Some wild shit happens. Then the credits roll. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a real. I'm gonna give it a few shots, and if any of them sound good, I'll put it in. He's almost like serpent, like a constant hushed whisper in the back of his. I can't do it. Voice is good for a bad guy. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. That there we go. It's good for a bad guy.